Have you ever had a dream so big it felt impossible? A dream that lived in your heart, whispering to you when you were quiet? This is a story about a dream like that. It's a story about a gentle dragon, a wise old friend, and the magical discovery that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with a leap, but with a single patient step. So find a cozy spot, let the world outside fade away, and join us on a journey to a land of snow-capped mountains and shimmering stars. High above a world blanketed in snow, where the air itself seemed to glitter with frost, stood the magnificent Frostwind Mountain. It was a place of serene beauty, where the peaks touched the clouds and the silence was broken only by the sigh of the wind. At the very top of this majestic mountain, in a vast, glittering crystal cave, lived a dragon named Aurelian. Aurelian was a sight to behold. His scales were the color of a winter sky at dusk, a shimmering silver blue that caught the moonlight and made him glow. His wings were enormous, powerful enough to stir the snow into dancing flurries, and his long, strong tail could carve paths through the deepest drifts. But despite his immense size and strength, Aurelian was a dragon of quiet contemplation and immense kindness. He lived alone, not from loneliness, but from a love for the peaceful solitude of his mountain home. He would spend hours just listening to the wind's ancient songs, watching the constellations wheel across the night sky, and thinking deep, draconic thoughts about the world below. Every year, as the days grew shorter and the air crisper, something magical would happen in the valleys below. Tiny villages would begin to sparkle with the warm, inviting glow of lanterns. Aurelian would watch from his peak as the forest creatures gathered in joyful groups. Families shared festive meals, and children, their faces upturned, would laugh with pure delight as snowflakes danced around them. He loved this season more than any other. It was a time of warmth, connection, and celebration. And every time he watched it unfold, a familiar feeling would stir deep within his chest. A powerful, persistent dream. Aurelian's dream was simple, yet it felt as vast as the sky itself. He longed to fly. Not the short, powerful hops from one ledge to another that he was used to. Not the controlled, careful glides down a snowy slope. He yearned for true, effortless flight, to soar, to feel the wind currents lift him higher and higher, to dance among the clouds and see the world not as a series of obstacles, but as a beautiful, sprawling map laid out beneath him. He dreamed of gliding freely above the festive villages, a silent, joyful spectator to the happiness below. He had tried, of course, countless times. He would stand at the edge of a cliff, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. He'd take a running start, his powerful legs churning through the snow. He'd stretch his magnificent wings as wide as they could go, catching the updraft. He'd leap, throwing all of his might into that one desperate push against the earth. But each and every time, the unyielding pull of gravity would win. He'd tumble through the air for a few heart-stopping moments before landing with a soft thud in a deep drift of snow. The mountain was always kind. The snow never laughed, and the wind never mocked him. But the silence that followed each failure felt heavy, a quiet reminder of the dream that remained just out of reach. One evening, as a full pearly moon climbed into the inky sky, casting a silvery glow over the mountain, Aurelian was sitting outside his cave, his great head resting on his claws, lost in his somber thoughts. Suddenly, he heard the soft, near-silent beat of wings nearby. He looked up to see a familiar figure alight on a rocky outcrop. It was Eldrick, an ancient mountain owl whose feathers were the color of frosted branches and whose large, round eyes seemed to hold the wisdom of 1,000 winters. Eldrick had lived on Frostwind Mountain longer than any other creature, and he had seen many seasons come and go. The owl tilted his head, his gaze gentle and knowing. "You seem troubled, my friend," Eldrick hooted softly, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Aurelian sighed, a plume of steamy air puffing from his nostrils. It was hard to admit his struggles, even to a friend. He felt a dragon of his size and power should be able to conquer the sky. But Eldric's presence was so calming, so non-judgmental, that the words tumbled out. "I want to fly," Aurelian admitted, his voice barely a rumble. "Truly fly. Not with brute strength, but with freedom, like you do. Like the wind itself." Eldric listened patiently, his wise eyes never leaving Aurelian's face. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer quick advice or easy platitudes. He simply listened until the great dragon had poured out all his frustration and longing. When Aurelian fell silent, a gentle smile seemed to touch the corners of Eldric's beak. "Ah," he said kindly. "Big dreams are not meant to be easy, Aurelian. If they were, they wouldn't be big dreams. They are meant to teach us things about ourselves we didn't know." Instead of telling Aurelian to just flap harder or be stronger, Eldric proposed something entirely different, something the dragon had never considered. "What if flying isn't only about your wings?" the owl asked, hopping a little closer. "What if it's about understanding the wind? What if you worked with the sky, instead of trying to conquer it?" A spark of curiosity ignited in Aurelian's heart, chasing away some of the gloom. Together, the dragon and the owl began to think. They talked for hours, long into the night, their voices mingling with the mountain wind. They discussed balance and lift, updrafts and currents. They talked about patience and observation. Eldric explained how he used the slightest shift in the air to his advantage, how he let the wind carry him instead of fighting against it. And slowly, an entirely new idea began to take shape in Aurelian's mind. It wasn't a spell or a feat of strength. It was a plan. They would build something. Not a clumsy machine, but an elegant glider, shaped like a bird's wing, designed to harmonize with the wind. The weeks that followed were filled with purpose and a new kind of energy. The work began. Aurelian, with his great strength, carefully gathered the strongest, most flexible wood from the mountain forests. Eldric, with his keen eyes and deep knowledge, spent days observing the wind patterns, noting how the currents flowed around the peaks and through the valleys. The smaller forest animals, drawn by the quiet, focused energy of the project, came to help. Squirrels helped gather tough, pliable vines, and Arctic foxes brought shed fur to help weave strong, yet soft bindings. There was no magic involved, just careful work, collaboration, and shared purpose. Progress wasn't always smooth. Some days felt agonizingly slow, as a piece of wood would split or a binding would come undone. Mistakes were made, and parts had to be redesigned and rebuilt. But through it all, Aurelian never felt the heavy despair he'd felt after his failed leaps. Now, every night, as he lay down to rest in his crystal cave, his heart was filled not with doubt, but with a quiet, steady hope. He was learning. He was building. He was working towards his dream in a new way, and he wasn't doing it alone. At last, the day came when the glider was finished. It was a beautiful creation, its wooden frame smooth and aerodynamic, its woven bindings strong and secure. It looked less like a machine and more like a giant, graceful wing. With the help of their forest friends, Aurelian and Eldric carefully carried it to a high, windswept ridge overlooking a vast, snowy basin. This was the moment. Aurelian's heart hammered against his ribs. He positioned himself with the glider, took a deep breath of the cold, crisp air, and stepped forward. He ran, and then he leaped into the wind. For a thrilling second, it seemed to work. But then, the glider tilted awkwardly to one side. It caught the wind at the wrong angle, and instead of soaring, it dipped and swirled, landing with a clumsy but safe slide in the deep powder snow below. Aurelian lay there, half buried in snow, the beautiful glider askew beside him. His heart sank like a stone. Had all that work been for nothing? Just another failure? But before the despair could take hold, Eldric landed silently beside him. The owl looked at the glider, then at his friend, and said quietly, Failure is not the end of a dream, Aurelian. It is simply part of learning how to hold it. Those words changed everything. Aurelian looked at the glider not as a failure, but as a first draft. They hadn't failed. They had learned what didn't work. With renewed determination, they hauled the glider back up the mountain. They studied its design, making small but crucial adjustments to the wings and tail, based on what they'd observed during the short, wobbly flight. They waited patiently for a day with the perfect wind strong and steady. Then, they tried again. This time, when Aurelian leaped from the ridge, something was different. The glider caught the wind smoothly. It lifted. Not high, not for long, but it lifted. For a few glorious seconds, Aurelian was airborne, the ground falling away beneath him. He felt the wind truly carry him, a buoyant, incredible sensation. He wasn't just falling gracefully, he was flying. A joyous, rumbling laugh escaped him, echoing across the silent mountain. He laughed not because he had fully succeeded, but because he had improved. He was one step closer. The dream was no longer impossible. The longest, coldest night of winter arrived, a night the villages below called the Great Starfall, when they believed the sky was closest to the earth. The stars burned with an intense diamond-like brightness in the clear, frigid air. Below, the lights of the villages twinkled more brightly than ever, a tapestry of warmth and community. On the high ridge, Aurelian stood with his glider one last time. It felt different now, an extension of himself. Eldrick perched on his shoulder, a familiar, reassuring weight. The owl nodded slowly. "Trust yourself," he hooted softly. "Trust the wind. Trust everything you have learned." Aurelian took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of stars, and stepped forward into the night. And then ... happened. The wind lifted him, not with a jolt, but with a gentle, loving hand. The glider held steady, cutting through the air with a soft whisper. And for the first time in his long life, Aurelian soared. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't falling. He was moving with the sky itself, a silent silver-blue shadow against the backdrop of a million stars. He banked and turned, feeling the currents of the air as if they were a part of him. From his incredible vantage point, he saw everything. The frosted forest sleeping under a blanket of snow, the winding rivers frozen into ribbons of ice, and the tiny, glowing villages filled with light and laughter. His heart swelled with a joy so pure and overwhelming it felt like he might burst. His dream, the one that had felt so impossibly big, had come true. When he finally glided back down, landing as softly as a snowflake on the ridge where he began, Aurelian bowed his great head to his small, wise friend. "I didn't fly because I was strong, Eldrick," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I flew because I learned to be patient, because I didn't give up." Eldrick smiled his knowing smile. "And," the owl added gently, "because you didn't fly alone?" From that day forward, Aurelian became a beloved guardian of Frostwind Mountain. He never forgot the lessons he learned. He continued to fly on starry nights, his magnificent form a symbol of hope and perseverance for all who saw him. He taught the younger creatures of the mountain that the biggest dreams often take the most time, that every effort, even the ones that feel like failures, are important steps on the journey. And so, whenever you look up at the winter sky, remember the story of the gentle dragon. Remember that dreams grow slowly, that true friends help us rise, and that even the heaviest of hearts can learn to soar. Thank you for joining us on this adventure. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who has a big dream of their own.